KPBS On Demand is supported by Fleet Science Center's newest exhibit, Survival of the Slowest. See firsthand how nature's smallest, slowest, and weakest creatures can not only survive, but thrive in the wild. Open May 24th through September 1st. Learn more at fleetscience.org.
Good morning, I'm Katie Anastas, in for Debbie Cruz. It's Wednesday, November 20th. We learn more about how people voted on the sales tax measure that would have funded transportation projects across the county. More on that next, but first, let's do the headlines. A strike by Kaiser San Diego mental health workers is in its fifth week. A new complaint by the union claims understaffing has left hospice patients without pain management. Kiara Keegan is with the National Union of Healthcare Workers.
Patients were reporting pain to the medical social worker, the replacement worker, and that social worker was documenting the pain and charting that they would notify the nurse to address the pain, telling the patient that they would notify the nurse and would get their pain managed, and then never following up.
Keegan says during the strike, Kaiser cut the staffing levels of medical social workers, violating Medicare regulations. Kaiser did not have an immediate response to a KPBS inquiry about the complaint. The union is asking for restored pensions, guaranteed time for patient care tasks, and pay equity. Kaiser is a KPBS underwriter. The U.S. ambassador to Mexico, Ken Salazar, visited San Diego yesterday. He highlighted the changes and challenges along the southern border, one being the delay of the Otay Mesa East Port of Entry project. There had been hopes it would be finished this year, but now the estimated completion date is 2028. Construction is now further along on the Mexican side. San Diego is falling behind.
So yes, it will be done soon. It's also an opportunity for us to look at our own processes and see how it can be done better. Why do things take so long? What is functioning and what is not functioning within the United States government to be able to do it better on projects up and down the border.
Salazar's assignment is coming to an end as a new administration takes over the White House, but the dozens of ongoing projects throughout the almost 2,000-mile-long U.S. and Mexico border continue. Construction crews have started working on a 2-week maintenance project on the Imperial Beach Pier. The pier is expected to reopen by the weekend. The Port of San Diego is replacing 2 pilings to maintain the pier's structural integrity. Jesus Puebla is the capital project manager at the Port of San Diego. He spoke with our partners at 10 News.
We want to make sure that we preserve this asset for the community because it is their asset. They're the ones that enjoy the sun, the sunsets. They go out and fish, or maybe catch a po' boy at 10 fish.
Crews are also replacing deck boards and performing some piping work. The port was awarded about $3 million for Phase 3 of maintenance and repairs. From KPBS, you're listening to San Diego News Now. Stay with me for more of the local news you need.
KPBS On Demand is supported by the National Conflict Resolution Center. Geopolitics, a divisive election year, and strained budgets are all topics that can create tension in the workplace. NCRC can help workplace leaders navigate polarizing issues with the Culture, Communication, and Conflict Certificate. More at ncrconline.com.
Measure G, the sales tax measure that would have funded transportation projects across the county, has failed. Metro reporter Andrew Bowen says the results show a divide between urban and suburban voters.
If Measure G had been limited to the city of San Diego, it would have passed with 54%. The measure also won majorities in the South Bay and in the downtown areas of many suburbs. But the further a voter was from a dense population center, the more likely they were to vote no. SDSU political science professor Brian Adams says inflation, poor turnout among Democrats, and a crowded ballot likely contributed to Measure G's defeat.
This is a really hard election year for any ballot measure, for any down ballot race. Everybody was so focused on the presidential race that it was really hard for anybody to get any traction.
Altogether, 51% of county voters said no to Measure G. Andrew Bowen, KPBS News.
Even though the right to an abortion is protected under California's Constitution, advocates say there are still barriers to accessing care. North County reporter Alexander Wynn says a new program by the North County LGBTQ Resource Center seeks to change that.
It's called the Reproductive Justice Project Program and is intended to serve people who need access to care.
This is not an ideological approach, but really basic human rights of access to health care.
Max Disposti is the center's executive director. He says most reproductive rights messaging is aimed at heterosexual women, not queer women, which is why this program is needed.
Majority of cisgender queer women have been pregnant, and they were more likely to have had an abortion than heterosexual women. This is particularly true for bisexual women and other women with a history of same-sex partnering.
The center received nearly $300,000 from the California Department of Public Health to run the program for the next 3 years. It includes one-on-one case management and accompanying people to intimate medical procedures, such as abortion and gender-affirming care. Alexander Wynn, KPBS News.
Guns originally bought in the U.S. are routinely found in Mexican crime scenes. Officials tell border reporter Gustavo Solis that the illegal flow of U.S. guns into Mexico is arming the cartels.
On a warm, sunny day in July, San Diego Representative Juan Vargas was part of a congressional delegation visiting Mexico City's presidential palace. Lawmakers got down to business with Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum and her predecessor, Andrés Manuel López Obrador.
You know, we wanted to talk about drugs, fentanyl, and we wanted to talk about sewage in San Diego.
But Mexico's leaders had other priorities.
They said, great, let's work on that. Help us with these weapons. You guys are arming the cartels.
They were talking about the illegal flow of guns from the U.S. into Mexico. Every year, more than 10,000 guns found in Mexican crime scenes are traced back to the United States. That's according to data from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. Known as the Iron River, the southern flow of guns has devastated Mexico.
They're incredibly dangerous, and we're seeing it. I mean, just to be honest with you, I mean, you see the shootouts there that they have. It's like, you know, any shootout you'd have in a war.
Under federal law, ATF is limited to only publish the aggregate number of all guns found in Mexico traced back to the U.S. It does not identify specifically which states or cities these guns came from. However, the public now has access to more specific data, thanks to a successful lawsuit against ATF filed by a San Francisco gun control advocate, John Lindsay Poland.
There's so much harm, there's so much disruption and chaos and pain that is produced using these guns. And so often when we talk about what's going on in Mexico, there isn't a reference to the sources.
The data covers a 7-year period from 2015 to 2022. It's broken down by zip code, gun manufacturer, model, and caliber. Lindsay Poland says this trove of data can help increase public understanding.
So if there's hundreds of guns that are traced to a zip code, then I think it's an opportunity for people in that community to say, we don't really want to be, the source of this.
Most of the American guns identified in Mexican crime scenes came from border states. Gun rights advocates are warning against using this data to make sweeping conclusions about the entire gun industry. Lawrence Keene is with the National Shooting Sports Foundation.
It's wrong to just take that data and make blanket assertions that, the dealers in a given zip code or, nationally are somehow corrupt.
The data does not include a purchase date, so there's no way to know whether a gun was bought 10 months ago or 10 years ago. Also, there's no information regarding whether a gun was reported stolen after being legally purchased in the U.S. But Keene does acknowledge that the data is a useful investigative tool.
You can't jump from the trace data to a conclusion. It's the starting point, potentially, of an investigation.
Tim Sloan was head of ATF operations in Mexico during the Trump and Biden administrations.
So in 4 years, I traced, my team did, we examined and traced about 97,000 firearms over 4 years. And that's just a small percentage of the firearms that are arriving in Mexico.
He believes that there is a direct connection between gun violence and migrants fleeing to the U.S.
You leave Guanajuato and you leave Michoacan, Mexico to come to the United States because you will die if you stay where you are. Your family will die. Your children will die. They will kill you. They will hang you from a bridge. The violence is so out of control and over the top and extreme. And they're all being murdered with firearms purchased in the United States.
Sloan is critical of ATF officials in Washington, D.C. He says they don't view the flow of guns into Mexico as a priority. And he points out that ATF has an overall budget of $1.5 billion, but the Mexico office only has a budget of $1.5 million.
Nobody can seriously believe that we're doing all we can when that's the budget that's provided.
ATF did not respond to a request for comment. Some lawmakers, like Vargas, say this new data can help them pass gun control laws.
It's very reasonable to have an assault weapon ban in the United States, but it would also help us in Mexico and in Central America and Latin America because they would not get these assault weapons in.
But those kinds of bans are non-starters for the gun industry. Again, here is Keene.
So they're legal to buy here in the United States, and they're not being used in crime. Why should we restrict the constitutional rights of law-abiding Americans because Mexico has a crime problem?
Keene says the focus should be on Mexico's inability to prosecute criminals. Gustavo Solis, KPBS News.
President-elect Donald Trump's vow to deport millions of undocumented people is stirring up fear and anxiety in some immigrant communities. KPBS's Amitha Sharma also spoke with border reporter Gustavo Solis about how California could respond.
California is a sanctuary state. What protection does that status offer the state's nearly 2 million undocumented people who could be targets of deportation?
Yeah, I think the biggest practical function of a sanctuary state is that it limits local law enforcement from helping federal law enforcement in enforcing immigration laws. So for example, here in San Diego, sheriff's deputies, any police department, if they stop you, they are not allowed to ask you for your immigration status. If you're detained, they are not allowed to turn around and tell Immigration and Customs Enforcement that they have you in their custody.
Describe who these undocumented people are, their jobs, their lives, their families, their contribution to the economy, and how might California and the rest of the country fare without them?
Here in San Diego County, there is an estimated between 150,000 and 170,000 undocumented people. And there's an extra 150,000 folks who live in mixed status households, right? That would be folks, undocumented parents and U.S. citizen children, or maybe a U.S. citizen spouse and their partner is undocumented, or even some families where one sibling will have status and the other one won't. If you take those two groups, undocumented people and mixed status people, it's almost the population of Chula Vista. So we're talking about a very big number. Now, how long have they been here? We do have some data showing that. Actually, about 60% of undocumented people in San Diego have been in the country 10 years or longer, and 1/3 have been in the country 20 years or longer. About 1 in 5 workers are in the service industry, right? 1 in 10 are in construction. And that tells you a little bit about the impact that policy like mass deportation would have, right? Here in San Diego, we just had news of a record year when it came to tourism, right? We made more money from tourism than any other time in San Diego. And we know that 20% of undocumented workers work in that industry. It would have a pretty big impact on that dynamic. Last question you asked was about economic contributions. I don't have numbers for San Diego County, but I do have statewide figures from 2023 showing that undocumented immigrants contributed $3.7 billion in local and state taxes.
Gustavo, you've spoken to some people who might find themselves on a plane back to where they came from. What are they and their families undergoing right now?
What, a lot of stress, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of anxiety, right? I talked to folks who heard from families who, the day after the election, kids didn't want to go to school. Folks didn't really want to go to work. There was just this feeling of depression, for lack of a better term. To be undocumented in this country already imposes a higher amount of stress and anxiety because of your lack of legal status and everything that's connected to it. Add the calls of mass deportation to that, and it just amplifies that stress already.
So San Diego is the #1 entry point for undocumented migrants. What are you hearing about the city of San Diego's potential response to planned mass deportations?
Well, I haven't heard anything from the mayor's office. If you take your question literally in just the city's response to mass deportation, there really hasn't been one.
You've contacted them?
Yes, I have contacted them. Actually, they're taking a little bit of heat right now because earlier this year in the springtime and finalized in the summer, the mayor's office defunded the Office of Immigrant Affairs, which at least symbolically offered a lot of support for San Diego's immigrant population. Now, I will say that doesn't mean there's no support in the region, right? The San Diego County has spent millions of dollars in temporary migrant shelters, not local money. It's money they get from the federal government through the original one was COVID Relief Fund. They got about $6 million from that. More recently, they got $19 million from FEMA, and there's plans to have another sort of shelter, although they haven't really executed those yet. They want to fill that gap.
That was KPBS border reporter Gustavo Solis speaking with Amitha Sharma. That's it for the podcast today. As always, you can find more San Diego news online at kpbs.org. Join us again tomorrow for the day's top stories. I'm Katie Anastas. Thanks for listening and have a great Wednesday.
Now on the finest podcast, the NPR Tiny Desk Contest, we bring you the history of the concert series and the competition and hear from the artists behind our favorite local entries. Listen now wherever you get your podcasts.